All done. All silent. Going. Go. So congratulations.
Welcome to the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate. Each episode, we chat with real estate author and industry leader Peter O'Malley to discuss the current property market conditions and provide insights to assist you on your property journey.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Current Market Insights. I'm your host, Kieran O'Brien, and with me as always is my co-host and good friend, Mr. Peter O'Malley. Peter, hello.
G'day, Kieran. Great to see you and great to be here.
Great to see you, Peter. Another big week. Well, I say that every week, actually. It's always a big week for us here in real estate. It's the industry that never stops. And I thought we might talk today on a topic that I find really interesting, and I think some of our listeners might as well. I wanted to start off in the data space. Everywhere you look now, the world is talking about AI, it's talking about data, it's talking about how we are ruled by the information that's out there. Anyone who's got kids knows that we're concerned about the amount of data our kids have access to and where it's going, etc. I would really love to spend just a little bit of time today talking about how data works in the real estate industry, I guess from an agency perspective. You know, do we use data and how do we use it? But also from a client perspective, what data do we really need and use? And what are some of the implications and protections in place for clients out there?
Kieran, real estate agents have traditionally relied on advertising over data. And what's really interesting in the last 6 months of the industry, the real estate industry training, how much of it is focused on maximising data use. So realestate.com and Domain are absolutely walloping real estate agents with advertising costs. And the only solution to those costs for real estate agents is to better manage their data, which versions of what that success looks like is selling properties off market without the intervention of realestate.com and Domain, getting to listing opportunities before your competitors do because the data feeds you there. You've got to collect the data, nurture the data and harness it as a real estate agent to be able to get those benefits out of it. But I think more than most industries, the real estate industry has overlooked the power of data. And as I say, just in the last 6 months, every industry trainer that I've listened to has had a really deep focus on data.
So if we draw back then, let's say you've been in the industry for quite a long time. How has data collection evolved for you primarily? I assume, you know, how we get someone's information now and what their requirements and interests are around real estate would be so much easier than it probably was 25 or 30 years ago.
Well, it's actually easier 30, 25 years ago because you could buy complete lists of every suburb straight off RP data or council records.
Right.
And the Privacy Act changed in 2001. But in 2001, realestate.com and Domain were charging next to nothing relative to the cost of print to real estate agents. So agents were in this wonderful space where they lost the quality data that was being provided by RP Data, who are now CoreLogic at the time, but they just started advertising really, really mad to compensate for that lack of data because relative to the cost of print in 2001, realestate.com and Domain represented tremendous value. Fast forward 23 years, realestate.com and Domain have got pretty savage pricing in place that vendors and real estate agents are increasingly flinching at. And it's incumbent now on the real estate agents to build their own database, collect their own data, but then also work out the best ways to nurture and work that data.
Okay, so you say it was much easier prior to change to the Privacy Act. Does that mean that it's impossible these days to acquire data in the same way, you know, bulk wholesale acquisitions, or it's maybe less readily available since those changes?
Look, I think you're entering really grey territory here, where we were told at the time that you could build your own database, but selling of data was not permissible like it was prior to that key date in 2001. So when I first started in real estate, we had perfect records of every homeowner and essentially nearly all of their landline contact numbers in every suburb that we wanted to, and it was just a matter of, it wasn't digital. You just go and buy reams and reams of of paper from this company, and you sit there and call it. So clearly data is now digital, which is much better for data mining and cross-referencing, where when I first started in the industry, data looked like getting the name and contact details of someone on a 3x5 card.
You still had the Rolodex.
That's right. Yeah, the old Rolodex, yeah.
Yeah, look, it certainly has shifted. And it's one of the reasons I'm so interested in this topic is I'm someone who takes my data very seriously.
As a consumer?
As a consumer, and as a professional. I like to think that I'm obviously very, very mindful of my requirements and my obligations legislatively. But I'm also very mindful of not breaching people's requests around data use and privacy, because I also, as a consumer, don't like those things being breached. But I feel like we've entered a phase where, as you say, the ability to cross-reference and utilise data across so many different spheres means that it's such an integral part of our day-to-day that it's inevitable that people's information is going to end up in the hands of people that they maybe didn't intend on being in originally. Do you think that's fair?
Look, I do. I think that the reality is that technology front runs government policy and regulations, if you like, and the government are now trying to catch up and put the genie back in the bottle. In terms of New South Wales, Victor Dominello of the previous state government was really, really focused on this space about data privacy and why do you need to give a real estate agent your driver's license, for example, just to make an application on a rental property, and what happens to that data from there. Due to the cost of labour, it's been very common in the real estate industry to outsource back office work up in the Philippines. So someone innocently walks through an open house on a Saturday morning, in good faith gives their contact details, then hands over their driver's license to make an application on the subject property, and before they know it, an unknown person in the Philippines has got hold of all of that data and assessing it. So they're the sorts of things where the marketplace will always front run the government regulations, and then it's up to the government to wind that back in. But as far as all of our respective digital footprints, it's fair to say that there's more data out there than we would care to imagine. We've all had the horrible experience of discussing something socially around the kitchen table or at a bar or something, and then the moment you open your telephone, open the internet on your telephone, what you're talking about is staring back at you on the screen. So data is very, very pervasive, and I'm not sure how we get around it other than going off the grid deliberately, to avoid where data's taking us and where technology is.
Yeah, look, it's really interesting. I think personally, data is so pivotal to everything we do now that we can't escape. We've Frankenstein's created the monster, and it's too hard to put it back now. But it is a situation where we need to embrace the power of data, because it can enhance our lives in so many ways. And the same things that we might complain about in one sphere aid us in another. And that's just the nature, I think, of this interconnected world that we've entered into. I guess looking at this, though, you as a real estate agent and let's say me as a consumer, when I come to that open home, is there anything I can do or say? Can I request not to be, form part of your database when I come to a property if I wanted to?
You can request that you don't have your data entered into a database. You can request that even though you're handing over your telephone number for security purposes as such, that you not be requested or marketed to from there. And that's a pretty common request at open houses, I must say. I think if you want to get really deep about data, what we're seeing across the industry is that there's software providers that want agents to upload their entire databases into their programs. And then there is, they'll never quite admit to this openly, but if you do read their terms and conditions, as I have, the consumer activity is tracked in the background, and that consumer's activity, not their personal details, but the fact that they could be a hot prospect, is then pushed forward to other clients who that consumer may never have spoken to.
Yeah, okay. So they're using metrics on people to determine whether they might be in the market for a car, or whether they're, in our case, whether they're looking for a particular home, for example.
Kieran O'Brien owns a house in Balmain, but interestingly, he's been to 4 open houses in Glebe Therefore, the system suggests that if he's looking at 4 open houses in Glebe and he lives in Balmain, he's what we now call a potential prospect, and he's put forward, not with all of that data explicitly put forward, but he's put forward to real estate agents as a high-quality candidate. And how did the system identify Kieran O'Brien as a high-quality candidate for selling his home? It's because of the activity that Kieran undertook, and the system pushed him forward as someone to keep an eye on.
Yeah, right. And you're suggesting that this can even offer my activity through to an agency I've never engaged with in my life.
The fact that you're a hot prospect,
Right,
not your specific Kieran O'Brien has gone to 4 open houses in Glebe.
Yeah, okay.
So this is why whenever I'm working on signing up a listing, a really, really common comment coming from the prospective seller for the last 4 or 5 years is, I haven't been speaking to any other real estate agent besides you, Peter, but I'm suddenly getting all these calls. Now, those words that I've just told you, I would hear that every day of the week.
Yeah, wow. That's surprising, I'll be honest.
Well, it comes back to the fact that they're probably surfing online, maybe increase their rate of open house attendees, inspections as they try to track the market. Digitally speaking, they're leaving a footprint behind them as they do their research on the property market. And never is because it would be a breach of the Privacy Act, never is one of these software providers going to say to a rival firm, Kieran O'Brien's looked at 4 houses in Glebe and he owns a property in Balmain, but they will push it forward as a potential hot prospect list. And I'm looking at now one of those industry prospects, and I'm seeing the names that the people are pushing towards me, and I know they're heat mapping that client's activity. So they're not explicitly saying this person is active in the market, but I know it's implied. That's why they're being pushed forward as a recommended call list today.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that and that you've gotten that feedback on the ground, because I do know CoreLogic, the company you mentioned earlier, they have the ability within their system to tell you who is likely to sell. And obviously they're basing that on metrics that we, as consumers probably have no idea how they're quantifying that, but they've got an algorithm that says, based on all of these criteria, it might be time and location, the average range of ownership in that particular suburb for that particular type of house, could be age, demographics, who knows how they're getting this. But you certainly can get access to what is a predicted list of potential sellers in a suburb. And if you've got a database that has all that information, that really is quite powerful. I'm interested too to get your thoughts, just segueing back to something you mentioned earlier about how third-party companies are actively seeking your data to include in their systems. Would it be fair to say, and this might be a bit cynical of me, but would it be fair to say that only exponentially increases the risk also of data loss, data breach, where you've got multiple...
We're seeing the healthcare system go through this. We know, obviously, I think, did Optus have a data breach? I know they had
Optus, and
they had
Medibank,
the outage, but did they have a massive data breach?
They did, yeah. I think it was 2 million customers or something.
Yeah. So, and as I say, the private health insurance space has had a number of major breaches. Shudder the day that it does happen en masse in the real estate industry, but I can see it happening. I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix, but I'm watching Ashley Madison at the moment.
I haven't watched it, but I'm familiar with the premise, like the story.
Yeah, so for those that don't know what Ashley Madison's about, that was the website that promoted affairs amongst married people. And they had globally 37 million people signed up, credit card details, fantasies, desires, the whole works. And they were hacked and given 30 days to shut the entire organisation down, or the entire database would be uploaded and released. And the company didn't shut down because the founder felt that was unfair and also wanted to float the company. It was taking, I think, in revenue $250,000 a day.
Wow.
In people buying credits to be able to speak to other people online that wanted an affair, and their partners didn't know about it, and they dumped the whole lot on the internet. So Ashley Madison predated Tinder. Tinder exists because Ashley Madison was essentially destroyed in that space. And as I say, in the real estate industry, there's a number of serious players in the Australian real estate market that are holding untold amounts of data, and heaven help us if that is ever breached.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine, I've never really given it much thought, but I would imagine some of the very large franchised groups would centrally hold, millions of people's details, right? Surely.
I'm not sure about that because I've never been part of a franchise, so I only want to speak to what I know, and I'm speaking to the software providers who run I guess you might call it the digital nervous system for real estate agencies. So real estate agents take a lot of data. It's a big issue, Kieran. We have to do compulsory personal development every 12 months. And this year it was a massive focus, as you know, because we spoke about it at the time, about data management, what to do if you do have a data breach, how to prevent a data breach. And we get it here in the office. We've got sensitive documents around the office. We need a process for where sensitive documents go. Don't worry about digital online. You might start a junior in the office, and they wheel the recycling bin out the front for the council to pick it up, unlocked, and it's like bring that bin back in. You don't know what's in there. So as a principle of a business that takes a lot of data, you've got to be vigilant about where all of this goes. Otherwise, you'll come undone in a PR nightmare.
Oh, yeah. Look, not just a PR nightmare, but, a legislative one too. I think it's important to recognise that real estate agents are mostly just real estate agents. We're not tech experts typically. And this is a space that may be foreign to a lot of people, particularly if they've been in the industry for a long time.
Yeah, well, we can't afford to. See, it's already moving. The industry's already moving beyond, and we won't talk about it today. But the thing I'm getting schooled up on at the moment is that we've got to be aware of money laundering and fraud. We're having more legislation thrust upon us as real estate agents about who is filtering dirty money through the economy. In the name of real estate, because that's a good way to clean money with a capital gain or even a capital loss for that matter. So real estate agents can't live in this naive bubble anymore. I just sell houses. You're exposed to sophisticated criminal networks that are washing money, particularly in, I would say, the upper ends of the Sydney and Melbourne property markets. And no matter where you are in the country, if you're standing at an open house and taking data from people and then asking for their driver's license and a copy of their council rates, etc., you're taking serious personal details from people. You better have a process to protect that and destroy that when you don't need it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incumbent on all of us to make sure that we are skilled up in this space. And I certainly, as we close the topic, I encourage anyone out there who is concerned about their data that they can always, no matter who holds it, you can always request a copy of what's on file and request changes or removal if that suits your current sort of mindset. As we turn a little bit then and focus somewhat more on property, I read an article today written by PropTrack, which is an arm of realestate.com. It's their research and sort of reporting arm, and they mentioned that April saw a pretty big surge in listings, and they said that this was a massive uptick in number of listings on the market. I'm really interested to get your thoughts, Peter, given that we talk week after week about the current market, what the listing volumes look like, how the market's faring. I wouldn't have thought that April would be such a strong resurgence. Based on the article, you'd get the impression that we were facing another boom. I'm interested, is it a boom or is it a normal bounce after a quiet period?
That was a national number, wasn't it?
Correct, yeah.
So look, I can't speak for the national market because I haven't taken a look at it, but when I do look at the numbers here in Sydney, there was a decline. So I think the right response to the points that you've just raised there is talking about the Australian property market as one is mistaken.
Yeah.
There can be booms and depressions going on at the same time across the country. Can I say that there can also be booms and depressed segments of the market in the same city? So at the moment, there's some properties on the market, not with us, but there's some properties on the market locally where they're essentially on the market for the same price that the people paid in 2019.
Yeah, wow. And
then there's others that have bought in 2020, for example, and they're on the market for 30 or 40% higher. Now, the common denominator there is, as we've discussed a lot in the last 6 months, it tends to be the higher end of the market that's charging and the bread and butter stuff that's getting knocked around at the moment. But generic reporting on property prices about Australian listings, Australian house prices is not worth the paper it's written on. And can I also say that in my view, any commentary around dwellings is actually not worth the paper it's written on either. You must always itemise out the difference between how house prices are performing and how apartments are performing, because rarely do they operate in sync.
I'm glad you mentioned that it's not worth the paper it's printed on, because really what I wanted to get the crux of here is this is not an uncommon article, right? Every other day you can read something about a boom here, a boom there. This is crazy. Results are off the charts. It's all, it seems to me it's a hyperbolic space. It's always the extreme, one end or the other. It's chaos or it's booming. What role do you think individual agents / agencies / the industry at large play in supporting this narrative? And I guess what I'm asking is, do you think agencies or particular agents are engaging in paid articles? And I say not ads, because ads are quite obvious, but paying for the sake of getting an article out there to pump a section of the market that's going to benefit what they work in.
If that is happening, the journalists need to be really, really careful if there's no disclosure there. I've seen an increase of the type of article that you read and you think you're reading a news article, and then there's a disclaimer at some stage in the article that says this is paid content.
I feel like I read every other day about a buyer's agent's success story, right? That's what made me think of this topic is, you read this person earning $35,000 a year bought 10 investments. And I go, oh gosh, that's interesting. And I never go into that thinking, wow, I'm going to get rich. I just read them out of interest. And it's always this person now runs X buyer's agency here or whatever. And this is clearly paid content. And I wonder if there is so much hyperbolic reporting in the space, what percentage can be viewed as actual news? And that's a hard question, I guess. But, are we starting to get to a point where it's no longer news reporting, it's purely
self-interest?
Self-interest.
There's no interest like self-interest. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look, if you want to know how good a real estate agent is, just ask them. And they'll spend the next...
Well, look at the size of their sign, right?
Yeah, that's it. They'll take the next 3 hours explaining how good they are and how well they've done for their clients, which is fair enough. It's a very, very competitive industry. I've never played that game, and the reason I've never played that game, Kieran, is that I've seen as many consumers lose on real estate as I have that have outperformed the market. And the majority of people ride with the market, and the market has rewarded buy and hold property owners very, very well over the last 40 years, as we know in Australia. So whether you're an investor, a buy and hold investor, or whether you're, you bought your house in the 1980s for $120,000, you still own it today, it's probably worth over $2 million. Tax-free, and all you've ever done is maintain it, so to speak.
Warren Buffett would be very proud, Peter.
Yeah, that's right. And, someone said to him, what was Buffett's line? How do you get rich? And he said, you get rich slowly. And he said, well, why don't more people do it? And he said, because I don't like the slowly part, something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah, spot on.
And so, yes, there are people that win big on the property market. Let's not kid ourselves. Their timing's perfect. What I can say about a lot of those people is they stumble into it. I actually have not met, in my 25 years of selling real estate in the Inner West, I have not seen a developer, a flipper, a speculator that has constantly outperformed the market and been able to identify and trade off opportunities that others have missed. Worse than that, I have seen people outperform the market 2 or 3 transactions in a row, and they start thinking they walk on water, and like a gambler at the table, the next transaction they do goes wrong and it wipes out all the gains. And some names jump into my mind when I think about those people. And I'm not happy that that's happened to them, but they got ahead of themselves, thought they had the game iced, and they knew how to outperform the market on a continual basis. And I can tell you, when they're doing that final transaction that's wiped out all the previous gains because they've gone loud and large into it, it's a very, very painful place to be watching it all happen.
Yeah, really really interesting, Peter. I think it is for me. It is an industry that trades on success, as you say, and you know that's a far more compelling story than the one that doesn't work. But I often wonder, you know, it must be really hard for people that aren't in the industry to keep a real good track of what's actually happening out there, given that the narrative is so skewed most of the time.
Oh, look, it is. If I can go to a text message that I got today, I wasn't going to mention this, but you've touched on this topic. Hi, Peter. Hope you're well. I'm looking at using this property buying company to aid me in getting multiple investment properties behind me. The company's called, let's just call it XYZ, and it's headed by a guy called, who I won't mention. He's doing pretty well for himself with over 230 properties in his own portfolio. I know you're busy, but see what you think when you get a chance, please. I've done a good bit of research and they seem like the real deal with good reviews. The reviews are probably written by our friend's mother, but there you go. And then we're catching up on Thursday night. So the first part of Thursday night will be saving my friend from making a massive mistake by investing with this buyer's agency firm. If it is so profitable, why are these people out selling courses and advice to the general public? Why aren't they just continuing to expand and explode the way that they claim?
Well, yeah, he'd have 2,300 properties instead of 230 if that was the way to go.
And the fellow in question here is not the only one that we've seen. He's been around for a little while now. He's drawn a little bit of press. There's others that have done it as well, and they've all end up doing the same thing. They all end up selling courses trying to tell mum and dad retail investors how they can get rich from property. You can't get rich quickly from property unless you're extremely lucky, but you can go broke quickly.
Yeah, that's really sage advice. Look, as we move towards a wrap-up tonight, Peter, we'll jump through and do our usual market wrap. Given we've just talked about the incredible surge in listings happening all over the country, it'd be nice to get a sense of what's actually happening on the ground here in Sydney.
Yeah, look, the auction clearance rate for the week was 53%, 1,024 scheduled, 242 sold prior, 300 under the hammer on the day. That's 542. 110 were rescheduled, so they come out of the clearance rate, which is interesting. That's a clean 10% there, and 42 were sold prior, so that would take us up to 584 out of 900, which gives you a decent clearance rate from there. So, look, they're pretty solid numbers. I heard a real estate agent interviewed on the radio on Saturday, and he was saying that he is expecting the market to slow a little bit from here. His open house numbers were down, and that kind of correlates with what we're seeing. Even those properties, and we do have a few at the moment that are drawing really, really big inspection numbers, when you get to the negotiation table with the buyer is very, very hesitant about committing in this environment. What else is coming on the market? Who else is interested? What have they offered? So there is a lot of hesitancy from buyers. There is no doubt that the interest rate talk, the rising unemployment talk has impacted on buyer psychology. Telstra announced big job cuts today. The unemployment rate crept up to 4.1% last week. People who are fairly well connected just musing to me, if you like, the next 12 months will be very interesting, quote unquote. Read into that what you will. So I think people are taking a good look at things at the moment.
Yeah, it's definitely the feedback I'm getting as well. I think a lot of people are hopeful, but maybe a little bit cautious, as you mentioned. And, you know, only this morning I heard an interview with an energy specialist talking about how, you know, energy prices, he doesn't think they'll ever come back down in Australia, how the cost of living in certain areas of the economy will probably never return to what we've seen in the past. And I think, you know, as a consumer, that's a daunting prospect, particularly if you're then considering investing in a massive purchase like a property. I will say, though, on those numbers, interestingly, I think the highest number of under the hammer sales we've had for a little while.
Yeah,
the
that's
first time
right.
it shifted above the before.
So there's a really high reschedule rate. You reschedule it not because you've got too much interest, but because you don't have enough, of course. But yeah, there were good numbers under the hammers. So that probably, you know, speaks to the market splitting in half again, where you know, the more prestige markets are experiencing really good demand, and, you know, putting generic apartments with strata issues to the auction market in this environment is just asking to pass in. It's asking for a failed campaign.
Yeah, it certainly is. As always, Peter, really great recap today. I think we've covered some important topics, and I certainly encourage our listeners, if you do have any questions, particularly about the data and data privacy and protections in the industry, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to assist where we can. As always, Peter, thanks so much for joining me today, and I look forward to chatting with you next week.
Likewise. Thanks, Kieran.
And thanks to everyone for listening. We look forward to speaking with you next time.
Thanks for joining us on the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate, the podcast providing real estate insights you won't find anywhere else.